Welcome to Conversations with Writers. I'm Andy, I'm a writer, and this is an educational YouTube series meant to catalog writing strategies and philosophies through conversations with other writers. A lifelong learner and mentor, Gerome Q. Banks is an accomplished doctor of education. He's a social science researcher at Penn State University, a master career coaching professional, and a federal strategic talent management scholar. In his professional and personal time, Gerome works with the federal government, nonprofit organizations, and individual federal employment job seekers to craft government talent management strategy. Before devoting his work full-time to talent management thought, leadership, and scholarship, Gerome spent nearly 2 decades of his career as a soldier, airman, and federal government civil servant in the Department of Defense. He holds a doctorate of education from Concordia University, Chicago, an MBA from the New York Institute of Technology, and a BA in International Economics from the American University of Paris. Gerome is a proud husband and doting father to 3 wonderful daughters. And this is my conversation with Dr. Banks.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Hanging in there. What are you working on now, and what motivated the project?
So I did finish my dissertation. So I successfully defended a few months ago. And so I am currently now a doctor of education, a social science researcher, a master career coach, and a federal strategic talent management enthusiast. So in my throughout my professional and my personal time, I actually work with the federal government, nonprofit organizations, and individual job seekers to craft talent management strategy for the federal government. So I've spent a pretty good deal of my career as a military service member and a federal government civil servant for the Department of Defense. And when I transitioned from the military to being a civil servant in the Department of Defense, it became strikingly apparent that civil service or civilian talent management in the federal government was far inferior to that of the service members whom I had the pleasure of serving alongside. And so I've spent, my occupational, my research, and my scholarship years on the care and feeding, so to speak, of federal government strategic talent management, both from within the government and outside of it, as I am now. So I'm currently working on a couple of things. One is a few things, one peer reviewed, one not, and one complete waste of time. The first is for the International Public Management Association for Human Resources magazine. And it identifies the top 10 predictors of federal employment job satisfaction based on a quantitative analysis of responses to the 2019 Federal Employment Viewpoint Survey. And so in fewer words, the government asks its employees, what is important to you? And traditionally, very little is done with that information. So, but recently, not surprising, I know, but recently, at least, over the last couple of years with sort of the great resignation talk, there's been some conversation in the talent management arena about what is actually important to employees, as if anyone cares. So what are, in other words, what are the intrinsic and extrinsic motivators that attract and keep employees? So this isn't, that's not a question that's really truly been studied in any particular depth in the federal workforce. So I decided to look at the responses from the last Federal Employment Viewpoint Survey. So that was, what was available was pre-COVID. So 2020 is available. I would certainly stay away from 2020 survey responses just because of the events unfolding in 2020. 2021 would probably be and I think these are fiscal years. So 2021 would be a close second to 2019, but 21's not available yet, and we're not done with 22. So I certainly expect to review that information in 21 and 22 to see the directional trends once that information becomes available. So What I've determined from 2019 is are the top 10 predictors of federal employee job satisfaction. So if anybody wants to know what those are, they're probably what you think they are. and so in order of importance, the top 5, let's say, are personal accomplishment, liking what one does, involvement in work decisions, work-life balance, and opportunities for advancement. And so while that list is not much of a surprise, I think the order of importance probably is to some degree, because a little bit further down the line in that list, once we get to like 7, 8, 9, and 10, are some of the more commonly, or what are commonly thought to be major contributors, like pay and recognition. Certainly nowhere near the top contributors, at least for federal employees. For federal employees, the predominance of motivators are really those intrinsic factors. The second project is peer reviewed, and this is where the dissertation comes in. It's a project with the Public Administration Review Journal. And after, having successfully defended my doctoral dissertation a few months ago, it was on strategic talent management in the US federal government, surprise, surprise, with a focus on job satisfaction that was explained by perceptions of employee talent management or talent management strategy. And so I at least think that that's pretty important work in the arena of federal talent management, and I hope others will think that that's important too. So I'm working to present parts of that research in and with the Public Administration Review for publishing. So the third thing is I also spend an inordinate amount of time writing about federal talent management and the federal hiring process on social media, like LinkedIn and Facebook. It's insanely frustrating because it occupies so much of my time and has so little impact on actual knowledge generation, but I can't help myself, right? On the off chance that it actually helps somebody else. And so that is what I spend, most of my time doing, my free time, at least, if you want to call it that, these days.
Thank you so much for that response. And that is very helpful because that is most of the hiring process now. It's all gone digital. And how do you present yourself digitally and get somebody to pay attention to you and ping that system, right? To get that application.
Very carefully.
So what have you learned about yourself through scholarly writing or research writing or the writing process in general or the research process in general? What have you learned about yourself?
I love this question. I've always considered myself to be a pretty horrible writer. So I have not necessarily learned much about myself, but I have confirmed that I am in fact a horrible writer. I am not illustrative in one bit. As a matter of fact, I'd go so far as to say that I am woefully uncreative in my writing. I'm a very concise person, just by personality, and I have a horrible time meeting word count minimums. So I don't fluff very much. And so even for this interview, I've had to kind of think about and construct and then maybe go back again and rethink about what I want to say and what I want to convey. Otherwise, this would be a pretty short 5-minute session, I would say. I'm generally not generally, but I am a very introverted and a very quiet guy by nature. I've gotten a lot better, I think, about expanding on my thoughts just by reading other pieces, and I tend to get a little annoyed when reading others' writings because I'm like you said that already. I got it the first couple of times, and I just wasted several minutes of my life that I'll never get back. And so that tends to be my style. Say it once and make it clear and not have to repeat myself several times. And so that's my little sort of anecdotal bias confirmation about myself and my writing style.
What's the role or responsibility of scholarship or scholarly writing? What keeps you generating material? Why do scholarship? Why write?
I think for me, scholarship is really all about contributing knowledge and perspective to a subject area, particularly where there was little or no knowledge, where little or no knowledge existed before, right? And, more importantly for me, I think it's about learning. I love to learn and I like to encourage others to learn, to do the same. I'm a lifetime learner. So, even if what I've researched for, researched or written never actually sees the light of day. I've personally gained from the knowledge of having just done the exercise of researching and writing, right? But all the better, though, if it helps others in the process as well.
When you're struggling in research or in writing, for whatever reason, so not enough time, too much time, too many ideas, not enough ideas, what sort of strategies do you use to get yourself back to the page?
So when I get stuck, right, and I might be alone in this, but I have my best ideas when I run, when I get my blood flowing. I'm a runner, nothing excessive, and no more than probably 5 to 6 miles a few times a week. But I particularly like running. I run outside. I love the views. I love the people. I love seeing nature. And, while I don't necessarily recommend this for everyone, when I run, I tend to have breakthrough ideas. And when that happens, more often than not, I whip out my phone when safe to do so. Unless I have to put a disclaimer in there, when safe to do so, and I write it down, and I take those ideas home with me, and I develop those ideas for more clarity. I don't know if it's something about having the blood pumping to the brain that generates the creative ideas, but it works. It certainly works for me, and it's happened, time and again on my runs. For the actual writing process, and again, not necessarily a recommendation, but in the mornings when I write, I like a strong coffee. In the evenings when I write, I like a good strong cocktail. That tends to do the trick in both cases. Both really kind of open me up and get the creative writing processes going. And I tend to write pretty concisely up front and go back and review and add to my writing. Both the coffee and the cocktail are good for adding the creative details, if you will.
What is your favorite part of the writing or the research process, and why?
Being done. That's it. I think I would go back to contributing knowledge and perspective to a subject area where little or none existed before. So I think we've established, I don't particularly like to write, but I do like to make a difference. And I've found that research and scholarly writing is one pretty effective way to do that. So I am serious when I say I think my favorite part of writing is being finished. And I know that doesn't sound like much of a writer's answer, but again, I don't really consider myself to be much of a writer. I use writing as a tool to teach and to generate knowledge and to generate learning for both myself and for others. Once I've completed that process, I can kind of move on to the next area of interest or area of refinement where I can make a difference.
I agree. I think that process of being complete and being done with it is really rewarding. It reminds you that you are getting somewhere, right?
Yeah, we're doing this for a reason. It's not just an exercise in futility for the exercise sake, but there's a purpose behind it.
What revision strategy or strategies do you find most useful when revising your own work, and why? What sort of problems or challenges does this activity or these activities help you solve?
In addition to being very boring, I'm also very organized. And so in most cases, I actually start with an outline, right? I know it's old school. And then I'll go through and I'll get anything down on the page in each section of what I have determined to be the draft of the outline. And so it helps me to leave that after I've sort of gotten something down on the page, to take a break from it and maybe get some inspiration from reading others, or maybe, do something else, or go and cook or go for a run and free my mind of it and then come back to it. So each time that I revisit my writing, I have more to say as the reader than I do as the writer. And so as the reader and a critic, I'm like, well, what about this? And I go back and I add details and clarifications and content to add to the piece and to address my critical self. So I find that I tend to make more progress as a critical thinker than I do as a creative one. So that's a process that really helps me.
I really think that the two self idea is really important too. So separating yourself from your work so you can actually honestly revise it to get the best piece that you possibly can out of it. So what reading suggestions do you have? Scholars or creative writers or journalistic writers? Who do you keep in your back pocket?
Read my stuff, right? If you're interested in federal strategic talent management, read me. There are some, I mean, there are some other authors, obviously, who are giants, just absolute juggernauts in the field. Collins, Malahi, Thunison, Gallardo, if you want to read some of the foundational and seminal stuff. But that's boring. I'm the only one that's creating context that's exclusively for federal talent, okay? But so, no, seriously, I read a lot of, and I wouldn't call them really like self-help pieces, but they're more informational in nature with the aim of, helping yourself. So lots of relationship books, Bible studies, leadership books, business, that kind of thing. So that's generally what I'm reading. Again, always, lifelong learner, always trying to improve. So I think that's no surprise there. I read a book a number of years ago, and this doesn't fall into the self-help-ish type of category. This is more academic, but I read a book that kind of changed the way that I looked at the world and changed the way that I looked at myself. And it's called Transformative Dimensions of Adult Learning by Jack Meserel. And I think that for most adult educators, they're either, familiar with his work or have heard of it to some degree. So it's extremely dry. It's a horrible read. Don't read it. Pick up the Cliff Notes. But it does describe the dynamics of how adults learn and how their perceptions are transformed by learning, right? So it goes into some details about childhood repression of unconscious and affected learning and the unconscious biases that our early learning creates. And then how we as adults have to be able to continuously and consciously recreate more rational learning through a deliberate process of transformation. And so what I learned, about myself from this deliberate process of transformative change was that the more that I learn, the more I realize how much, how little I actually know, or how much I actually don't know. And so that's a very, that's a really humbling process, because the more that you absorb other things, kind of the smaller you get. So people will ask me about my opinion on like popular topics or current events. And my honest answer about them is usually like, I don't know enough about the topic to have formed any substantive opinion on it. And which is probably like insanely infuriating for someone who's like just trying to engage me, but it's an honest answer. Like, I don't know enough to answer your question in any meaningful way. I'm sorry. I just have come to the realization that I know so little because of how much, I've learned. And then on top of that, I've become acutely aware through this transformative sort of learning journey, acutely aware of how whatever it is that I learn is because it's been made available and it's been produced, generally speaking, by someone or something else that gave me the opportunity to learn it. And so the short way to say that is I only know what someone else wants me to know. And so that's also a very humbling experience, right? So you can read all of the books and the studies and the literature that you want to, or the reports, or you can watch the news and television and observe things around you, but you really can only know what it is that someone else has allowed you to know. And so I mean that's a pretty heavy topic for a 20-minute writing interview, but it kind of has like it's taken over my very being. But I really do appreciate how much the research and the scholarly research and learning and writing has contributed to not just my learning, but to that of others, and given me the opportunity to share what I've learned with others, in a way that others have been able to do with me as well.
Wonderful, thank you. I agree, and I think that learning and education gives us so much in terms of mobility. It's necessary. Thank you so much for making time to hang out with me. I had a wonderful time talking with you, and I really appreciate it.
Anytime. I hope to come back.